Hi everyone, welcome to this DW live stream. We're live from Berlin. Today we're asking who is talking. Are negotiations to end the Iran war really underway? If they are, who's actually involved?
It's a good question, and we'll take a closer look at key regional players in what is a delicate situation in this conflict. One of those is Turkey. We're going to be going there as well. I'm Anthony Howard, by the way.
I'm Manu Coopers at McKinnon. So today we're looking at off-ramps and endgames to the war on Iran. The US President Donald Trump on Monday morning announced in all caps that he was delaying attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure after what he said were productive talks with Iran. Take a listen to the president. He was talking on camera just after he said that.
We have had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. Perhaps that hasn't been conveyed. The communication, as you know, has been blown to pieces. They're unable to talk to each other. But we've had very strong talks. Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner had them. They went, I would say, perfectly.
So Iranian officials then denied any such talks had taken place. The Speaker of Iran's parliament said this: no negotiations have been held with the US, and fake news is used to manipulate the financial and oil markets and escape the quagmire in which the US and Israel are trapped.
So all of that is to say we're setting up our first guest, and he's well qualified to talk about this and hopefully unpack a little of what we've heard and what is the way forward. That is Fawaz Jarjez, who's going to join us, Professor of Middle Eastern Politics and International Relations at the London School of Economics. Fawaz, we were hoping to put up the faces of these people who are in these negotiations, but look, I guess the point is, I feel like viewers might know you better than some of the parties to this negotiation at this point. We've tried to set it up as best we can. It's a really important negotiation. I want to ask you a silly question, I guess. Is this negotiation really taking place or is it not?
Actually, that is the $65,000 question, American question. I mean, for your own viewers, we need to caution our viewers is that it's the fog of war, right?
Right.
They have to be careful. There's a great deal of dust, and we are all blinded by the dust. On both sides, the Americans and the Iranians have their own narratives. And what we know about President Trump, I mean, this is well documented. He basically has contradictory statements, shifting positions, and also he engages in deception and falsehood, according to even American media, New York Times and CNN. So here what we know. We know that key regional states, Pakistan, Oman, Qatar, Turkey and Egypt have been, basically passing statements and messages between the American and the Iranian teams over the past 2 weeks or so.
Right.
We also know that American Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff have been also in communication with their Iranian counterpart, the foreign minister. And we know that the head of the parliament, Mohammad, Ghalibaf, has also been involved. The most important piece of information for me, for your own viewers, is that Pakistan strongman, the top general, Asim Munir, spoke to President Trump on Sunday for a long time. And Pakistani Prime Minister Mohammad Sharif also spoke to the Iranian Prime Minister on Monday, the following Monday.
Right.
And more evidence is emerging that Pakistan could serve as a venue for further talks between the Americans and the Iranians. And what the piece of good news that I think it's a very important piece of news is that America's Vice President J.D. Vance might participate in the Pakistani talks because J.D. Vance is skeptical of the war. And I don't think the Americans trust Witkoff and Jared Kushner because of their bad experiences with them last June and this time. So Pakistan is in, even though Turkey Oman, Qatar, and Egypt are also playing a helpful role in this kind of mediation.
It's fascinating. I mean, Pakistan's involvement here, I do want to ask you, obviously, about that, because you say they've now got a key role. But I want to get it straight as well that you think that J.D. Vance getting involved here is a good thing, correct?
The reason why, because J.D. Vance is the key policymakers in the White House who has been skeptical about the war all along. In fact, what we have, the evidence that's emerging from the United States, is that throughout the deliberations in the White House, J.D. Vance was the only policymaker who was really asking hard questions from the military and the intelligence communities. He wanted the military and the intelligence communities to put all options on the table, and the military did. The chief of staff, the American chief of staff, General Kane, basically said that it's a very difficult thing to topple the Iranian regimes. And we know now that the U.S. National Intelligence Director basically released a report a week before the U.S. and Israeli war on Iran, saying, quote unquote, that even a large military operation could not really get rid of the Iranian regime. So J.D. Vance being there is a reassuring sign for the Iranians, and also is a reassuring sign for the no forever war within the MAGA camp, within President Trump's political base in the United States.
I'm just going to jump in here, Fawaz, because we're streaming on YouTube and on TikTok, and I just wanted to remind our viewers, you need to send your questions in, any comments you have, because we've got Fawaz Judges here who really is an expert in this field, and we will obviously put any questions that you have to him and to our correspondent who we're going to be speaking to later. We've got one comment here from Jeff Bilkins saying, imaginary talks, maybe voices in his head. I presume he's talking about Donald Trump there. But as I said, any comments and questions, send them in. Anthony, carry on.
Just want to go back to the Pakistan entering into this discussion. I think that country might come as a surprise to some people who haven't been as following as closely as you have. How did that come to pass? How did Pakistan get a voice in this really, really important discussion at such a delicate moment?
You know, for your own viewers, Pakistan's top general, General Munir, has established close relations with President Trump regarding minerals in Pakistan, and also during the Pakistani-Iranian Indian War, that he emerged as a top leader, the top leader in Pakistan, and he was able to build close relations with President Trump. And we know that President Trump is all about personal relations. What you have in the United States really now, the decision-making process is all about Donald Trump, and it's all about personal, one-to-one relationship. So Pakistan now, and in particular the top general, General Asim Munir, is really quite a trusted figure when it comes to Donald Trump. And also relations between Pakistan and Iran are very close. The reality is Pakistan is also a nuclear, armed state. So it has credibility. And I think the big question is, even if the talks take place, what are the possibilities? What is the likelihood of a diplomatic breakthrough? I am very skeptical, but it's a different question. We can talk about it later on.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of people joining that theme there of scepticism, let's say, in the chat, Fawaz. But great to hear it come from your mouth as well. Have you got anything at this moment, Anya?
No, you carry
Otherwise,
on.
Look, I just want to talk about Trump as well. Clearly, he's the key player here, Fawaz. You're talking about people who have got his ear. We've got the hawks and the doves, if you like, trying to sort this out behind the scenes, Pakistan and J.D. Vance. But he is such a mercurial figure here. We're looking for an intelligent understanding of how this could end. But he is such a mercurial figure. Synonyms for that might be volatile or capricious, temperamental, excitable, fickle. I looked it all up, including protean. But it all amounts to the same thing about Trump trying to describe him, tending or able to change frequently or easily. Because we're looking for a logical answer. we have to be ready surely after watching Trump for 5 years that it might not be such a logical decision. Is it possible that he just gets sick of this and he's had enough and he turns on his heels and he walks right out of here? That has to be a possibility.
Well, again,
you go ahead.
You're absolutely correct. You know, we're all are speculating. We're trying to read President Trump's mind.
Right.
Here what we know. We know that President Trump monstrously miscalculated by launching all-out war against Iran. From the evidence that's emerging, President Trump believed, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convinced him that was going to be an easy war, a fast war, a quick war, and then the Iranian regime would collapse like a ripened fruit. This is now, it's documented. And now the war has lasted much longer than President Trump was hoping for. The economic pain now is really quite real, especially when it comes to American consumers. All prices jumped by 50%. So, and the market also was down in the past 1 week. And President Trump understands the language of economics. So what has happened now is that President Trump is looking for an off-ramp because he wants to really basically lower energy prices. And he also wants to convince Americans that this is not going to be a forever war, in which he basically criticized most of his political career. I mean, look where we are now. Now we're not talking about whether the Iranian regime will stay in place or not. That's not really what's on the table. On the table, what's on the table is, will Iran allow the Strait of Hormuz to be opened? And it tells you a great deal about when the war started, President Trump called on Iranians to basically come and take over their government. And now President Trump is basically boasting about the fact that there will be an end to this particular war and the Strait of Hormuz could be opened. How about the enriched uranium? You have Iran has 790 pounds of high-grade weapons, enriched uranium. How about Iran? Iran will never accept a temporary ceasefire. Iran wants a lasting peace because of its experience last June and now that the United States basically attacked Iran twice. So they want guarantees. Who will give Iran guarantees? So even though Pakistan does not really have, with all due respect for Pakistan, Pakistan does not really have the means and the weight to give the Iranians guarantees that the United States and Israel will not attack Iran again. And the question is, where is Europe in all of this? Because Europe seems to be absent. Where is China in all of this? China is absent, and Russia is absent. And that's why I'm a bit skeptical, because the odds are against a diplomatic breakthrough, because the differences between the two sides are really quite very big, unfortunately.
Fawaz, you used the words monstrous miscalculation earlier, monstrous miscalculation by Trump. We've got a comment from a viewer, Luxy1234, who says when Trump claimed that negotiations with Iran were progressing well, only for Iran to shoot him down, was this a mistake for Trump? ? Are exaggerations such as what he did a silly move on his part? What's your reaction to that?
It's not my reaction. We have evidence now. We need to tell your viewers that we have evidence that Iran put on the table a very impressive proposal for the United States in Geneva in the last round. And one of the top British diplomats, Jonathan Powell, an advisor to Prime Minister Starmer, he said, quote unquote, he was surprised by the painful concessions that the Iranian team basically offered in order to avoid war. And he said he was shocked when the United States and Israel decided to attack Iran after the progress was made. And the same statement, as you know, was made by the Omani foreign minister who mediated between the two sides. And that's why, I mean, in the United States now, there's general consensus that this war, Donald Trump's war of choice, will go down in history as a greater miscalculation than President George W. Bush war against Iraq in 2003, because the consequences are greater, the strategic consequences. Iran is not Iraq. And also the Strait of Hormuz is really, I mean, almost 1/3 or 1/5 of oil and gas and fertilizers pass through the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. And regardless of what happened now, Iran will have a chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz in the future. And Iran's neighbors, the Gulf state, are really paying the costs for the American-Israeli war because their economies now have come to a halt in the past 3 weeks.
Yeah, the chat is lighting up as we go here, obviously. Yes. Mustafa asking that question that you're alluding to. The world must come together for peace and reign in the Middle East, particularly the Gulf, called the USA, as they put it. Trafala says there's no guarantee on nukes, so what are we doing? And a lot of people just simply using laughing emojis when it comes to even the idea of peace at this point and knowing what we know and don't know about negotiations. If, Fawaz, you were asked to then paint the picture for us of this off-ramp, if we are going to get there, what team of people, what connections of states, of countries, who's going to put the deal together? What does that off-ramp look like? Who's going to construct it? Where can it possibly come from?
Well, really asking me a very difficult question. I don't think anyone really will have an answer for you, for your own viewers. And that's why I have my doubts, and that's why I'm skeptical. I'm hoping that Europe will become more involved in the negotiation process in the future. But here is what I see. I see a lasting settlement between the United States and Iran. I see that the Strait of Hormuz will be opened as a result of this particular settlement. I see that American sanctions and global sanctions on Iran will be lifted. I see that basically the United States will provide guarantees when the settlement is reached that neither the United States nor Israel will attack Iran again. And I also see that the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Oman, and others will be involved in a settlement that basically creates what I call a security architecture for the future, in which the national interest of the Gulf state and Iran will be taken into consideration. But the most important point for me is for President Trump to basically read the Riot Act for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and say, enough is enough. This is it. This is the big dog now barking. This is the big dog settlement, and no other, ally of the United States will have a veto or basically challenge the big dog when it comes to the big settlement with Iran.
Fawaz, speaking about Israel, Netanyahu, we just heard just in the last couple of hours that the IRGC, so the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is warning Israel that it might strike Israeli troops in Gaza. I think we've got a quote card to bring up there. What they basically said was, we warn the criminal army of the regime that if the crimes against civilians in Lebanon and Palestine continue, the assembly points of enemy forces in northern occupied Palestine and the Gaza Strip will, without any consideration, come under heavy missile and drone attacks by the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Fawaz, can we ask you, you laid out a vision of what you see possibly happening, but with these kinds of threats, where could this take the conflict?
I think, again, come back to, this is war. And the Islamic Revolutionary Guards are, basically sending their missiles all over Israel. So this statement really does not change the reality of the options and the means, the military means of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards. I think the underlying point behind this particular statement is that any resolution of the American-Iranian war has to take into account a settlement on the Lebanese front and the Gaza front. That's what the Iranians are saying, that any settlement with us has to stop the Israeli war in southern Lebanon and has to basically have a vision for Gaza. For your own viewers, the plight of Gaza is catastrophic now. Only one third of humanitarian aid, reaching Gaza. Israel really frequently attacks Gaza. And not to mention, there is all-out war in Lebanon. So the statement is not really about military threats, because it's all-out war. between Israel and Iran. It's about really the future settlement. What the Iranians are saying to the Lebanese and the Palestinians, we hear you, you're part, you are on our minds. We will not let you alone if we decide to have a settlement with the United States.
Fawaz, absolutely brilliant. The chat has been as animated around your thoughts as we've seen for some time. It's been brilliant to listen in. Slightly depressing to know that you're at a loss sometimes as much as we are as to what the path forward is. But a really brilliant explanation of why it is that some of these answers aren't just so easy at the moment. Really brilliant to talk to you as always. We thank you so much for your time.
Fawaz, thank you. Professor of
Thanks
Middle Eastern
me.
Politics and International Relations at the London School of Economics. Great to have you on as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we've got another guest coming up.
We do.
You want to take us there?
We do, because what we've been talking about, obviously, is that there are so many parties involved in this, and what we want to kind of talk about is the sort of the regional efforts to mediate and to try and bring this conflict to an end. Fawaz was talking there earlier, Fawaz Gurjas, about Turkey, Oman, Qatar, Egypt. So all of these sort of neighbouring powers who are playing a role in this, they've all held talks with the warring parties.
There's a lot of people in this chat.
That's right. Keep asking us questions because we can see them all coming in here. You might have some questions for our next guest. That is DW's correspondent, Yulia Khan. She has been reporting from Turkey for years. She knows a lot about this, and she's actually at the Turkish-Iranian border right now. It's great to see you, Yulia. We've got a lot of questions about what is going on here, about Turkey's role in all of this, and we've got questions coming in as well from our chat, so we'll bring those in as well. But I just wanted to ask you, first of all, Yulia, about Turkey's role in these talks to end the war. Just tell us how Turkey's involved and why Turkey's involved.
Well, yes, Ankara is part of these concerted diplomatic efforts that are going on right now with greater intensity, aimed at, first of all, averting US-American strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure, but also preventing even more chaos for the wider region. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has been very busy in the past days talking to regional counterparts. There are reports that Turkey and Egypt are somewhat in the driver's seat here in these diplomatic efforts, relaying messages between Washington and the regime in Tehran. Even though this has not been officially confirmed by Ankara, they haven't really commented on these ongoing efforts. But Turkey is in a quite unique position here. They are a member of NATO. The government of President Erdogan is known to have very good relations with the Trump administration, so they can talk to the US and hopefully find an open ear there. But they have also maintained good working ties with the Iranian regime, or what's left of it. Even though Turkey and Iran are often described as regional rivals, they are direct neighbors. That puts Turkey in a position where they can actually try and mediate. And I may remind you that Turkey was actually trying to do just that. They have been trying to prevent this war from starting in the first place. They had offered talks in Istanbul, which were never held. And this is because for Turkey, this war just across the border, it hits very close to home. There are obvious security concerns. There have been a number of ballistic missiles fired from Iran towards Turkish airspace. They have been intercepted, but this is an obvious concern. There are other concerns regarding potential spillover effects, a possible refugee influx from Iran should the situation there further deteriorate. Then you have energy disruptions. You have, of course, the increasing energy prices. That could be a big problem and an even bigger problem for the already inflation-ridden, ailing Turkish economy. So Turkey has a lot of reasons right now to really step up and try to somehow bring all sides back to the negotiating table and end this war.
So Turkey is in a really good position. I should just mention, actually, because I was talking earlier that it was Turkey, Qatar, Egypt and Oman. And Anthony just reminded me that Oman is not a part of this negotiation. But just getting back to Turkey, so it's in a geographically good position. It would benefit from this war ending, as so many other nations would. But given, Yulia, the mixed messaging we're hearing, from the US, from Iran, just give us your take on the negotiations that are happening to end this conflict, sort of from a Turkish perspective, because it looks pretty chaotic, doesn't it?
Well, yes, we're all basically trying to see through the dust, as your expert just put it. From where I'm standing here at the Turkish-Iranian border, it looks very intransparent at the moment. But what I think Ankara is maybe trying to do is offer both sides, Washington and the regime in Tehran, an off-ramp, a face-saving way out of this war that has arguably inflicted great losses and damage on both sides. And maybe they don't want to talk to the press right now or, release any sort of information that could make one or the other side look bad or weak. And this is not an unusual thing. I've been following Turkish diplomacy for many years. They often only do come forward when they really have to sell some sort of a breakthrough or something that can be, presented as a success, however limited that might be. So the fact that we're not hearing much coming out of these talks and negotiations or whatever is going on, it might just mean that they're not there yet.
Yulia, I just want to bring in one comment from one of our viewers' happiest moments, saying, go fight your own wars on Mars or Pluto, leave the poor man's Earth alone, the whole world population is suffering. Brings up the fact that, these wars affect people. They affect the populations of the country. Now, I know that you're at a border crossing between Turkey and Iran. Just tell us a little bit about there's obviously, we can hear lots of voices behind you, where exactly you are, what you've been hearing. Have you been speaking to any Iranians crossing the border into Turkey?
Yes, right. I'm at the Kapıköy land border crossing. It's one of three between Turkey and Iran. And, we're in week 4 of this war. Iranian airspace is largely closed. So this is one of the few ways out of the country for people who want to leave right now. And we've been seeing dozens of people coming from the Iranian side into Turkey. Not many people, I should mention, are ready to speak to us, especially not in front of the camera. There is widespread fear of the regime, but I've been managing to speak to a couple of people, and they all come for different reasons. Some are bringing, luggage just for a few days, for a short break from the war. It's also the Newroz holidays right now, so Iranians traditionally come to Turkey to spend some days here. Others come with heavier luggage. I've spoken to 2 younger women who came all the way from the capital Tehran, that's been very badly hit. They're almost on a daily basis, strikes on Tehran. And they said they were very scared. They showed me, videos that they've been filming with their smartphones of explosions. Add to that the internet blackout. People say they have very, very limited opportunities to reach their loved ones. So one young lady, she just told me she's a student actually in Istanbul. She went to Tehran to be with her family just before the war started, and she's been through it all for the past 3 weeks and a few days, and now it just got too much for her. She is going back to Istanbul to her school, but she said she's not sure when or if she can return. And then at the same time, and that is important to mention, we see people here at the border crossing going back into Iran despite the obvious risks. I talked to a man who's been on a job assignment here in Turkey for a couple of months, but he said his pregnant wife and his children are in Iran and he can't leave them alone. He has to be with them in these times of crisis. So there are, of course, human dramas here. It's people, after all, who suffer from this war. But, Iran's neighboring countries, including Turkey, they've long feared that US-Israeli attacks on Iran and Iranians' response could trigger a larger refugee influx. But from where I'm standing, I can tell you this has not happened yet. We hear about 1,000 people per day. This is what one authority here told us coming in from the Iranian side, and that is not much of an increase to what it would normally be compared to what it would normally be here at the border. So far, no sort of bigger refugee influx. Many Iranians, they can also stay here in Turkey for up to 90 days visa-free. So people go out, they see how things develop, and eventually, many tell me they want to return to Iran.
Okay, I think Anthony's got a question.
Yeah, there's been a lot coming up in chat, particularly on TikTok. A lot of people watching on TikTok, Yulia, wondering about the issue of immigration in Turkey. It has been a sensitive topic there for years. What is the public reaction to the war and the effect that Turkey is seeing, the effect as these people spill over and, as you point out, are heading back into Iran? What is the Turkish population view of this war as it goes on and more of these effects are adding up?
Well, if you put this into perspective, right, the actual direct spillover effects of this war on Turkey have been rather limited if you compare that to other countries, the Gulf countries, for example, right? People here in Turkey, of course, they have seen it all over the television. There have been at least 3 ballistic missiles fired from Iran towards Turkey. They've been intercepted by NATO defenses. Iran later said they have not been fired by us, so people don't really, know who's firing what at the moment. But this is sort of made it clear to people that this could escalate any moment. Turkey could become a target. So far, the defenses have been working. That's a good thing. So people are not worried to an extreme extent. Also, if you look at, how they evaluate the entire war situation, they firmly blame the US and Israel for striking Iran first, for having started this war. I would say anti-Westernism, anti-Americanism has increased here a lot. The population's perception of Israel has already been extremely critical, even hostile at times. But then, of course, when you talk to people, in their daily lives, everybody feels the rising energy costs. Benzene, gasoline has become more expensive here in Turkey too, and the Turkish economy is a very troubled one. We have double-digit inflation, so the fear is that, the longer this war continues, the energy prices will go up. Everything here in the country will get more expensive. And then, of course, ordinary Turkish people, they suffer too.
And that's, of course, something that everyone is feeling, those rising energy prices and the rising petrol prices. And, of course, the anxiety in general. We're going to leave it there. Yulia, thank you so much for talking to us from the Turkish-Iranian border. Really good to get your insights and your thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Yulia.
Thanks. All right, we're going to do a quick wrap-up, aren't we? Is that you or is that me, Anthony?
Yeah, I'll kick us off.
Yep.
Before we go, let's bring you up to date with the latest developments in the US-Israeli war against Iran and its ripple effects. We've been talking about them around the world. We've talked in different places. Number one, I guess, is Trump says he's postponed strikes on Iran after holding productive talks with Tehran. However, Iran's parliamentary speaker denies that any such talks have taken place. So unwrap that. Meanwhile, Iran has continued its strikes on Israel, causing damage to buildings in Tel Aviv. And after a slight drop in price, oil has climbed back to more than $100 a barrel. That's obviously a very fluid situation, but we're monitoring that the other day, as well as the human cost. The price is the one we can follow a little more easily at this point. Amazing chat today.
Yeah, really good. Thank you, everyone. You sent in some great questions and comments. All of this, the confusion, the anxiety, the yo-yoing oil prices, it's all having effect on all of us, and it's great to hear your thoughts and on your comments.
Judge is always good, but didn't he dominate
absolutely,
today?
He was great, yeah. So thank you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being involved. We'll see you again soon.
Bye-bye.